This is Chicago's Morning Answer.
That's enough. Put down the mic.
On AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy J this morning, Chicago Tribune columnist John Cass. And John, Peter Boghossian has an important piece in the Wall Street Journal. He is one of the academics that was behind the Sokol affair redux, the hoaxes on these quote-unquote peer-reviewed academic journals. He and two other academics, you'll recall, submitted a bunch of fake papers to these insular academic journals that professors use to credentialize themselves, to get published, and also that advance all sorts of disciplines that are of dubious academic quality.
Shrimp exercise studies and so forth.
So one of the papers that they submitted was about canine rape culture at dog parks. And the dog parks is a petri dish for canine rape culture.
Of course.
Published. Another was submitted to a peer-reviewed journal of women in social work. The title of the paper was Our Struggle is My Struggle, Solidarity Feminism as an Intersectional Reply to Neoliberal and Choice Feminism. And in the second half of the paper, they cut and pasted a chapter from Mein Kampf, published.
By whom?
The journal in question, the academic journal in question. And so when so
it's all the headline.
And when they came out and showed everybody these journals had been pantsed, then, of course, who was the target? Not the journals, not the cranks running the journals, the professors, including Peter Boghossian, who's a, frankly, left-of-center philosophy professor at Portland State. So he's got a piece explaining how this whole thing works in the Wall Street Journal. It's not just that colleges and universities are left. It's that it's intellectual fraud that's happening on campus. The whole thing is a fraud. Not the whole thing, but so many of the disciplines. You've almost certainly heard some of the following terms: cisgender, fat shaming, heteronormativity, intersectionality, patriarchy, rape culture, and whiteness. The reason you've heard them is that politically engaged academicians have been developing concepts like these for more than 30 years, and all the time they've been percolating. Only recently have they begun to emerge in mainstream culture. How did this happen? How have those working on what's come to be called grievance studies managed to extend their ideas far beyond the academy while convincing people that their jargon adds something meaningful to public discourse? A fellow aggrieved center-left professor mugged by the reality of life on college campus these days, Brett Weinstein, calls the process idea laundering. Idea laundering. Here's how it works. First, these academics have strong moral impulses about something. For example, they perceive negative attitudes about obesity in society. They want to stop people from making the obese feel bad about their condition, so this is important to them. Those academics who share those sentiments start a peer-reviewed periodical, such as Fat Studies, and make it and promote it as a legitimate academic journal.
Funding by the governor of Illinois. Okay.
Eventually, they petition university libraries to carry the journal, making it financially viable for a large publisher. And then the Fat Studies Journal becomes established, and it's at the library. Then they have an answer to when one asks the obvious question: How could fat be just a narrative? There's medical evidence, the type 2 diabetes,
Experts
other risk factors, right? It doesn't stop there. Grievance scholars then use articles like those published in Fat Studies to credentialize themselves and receive promotion and tenure from the institutions in which they work. So it becomes this self-reinforcing ecosystem. Grievance scholars hire new faculty members with similar moral commitments who've written for the same journals, and on it goes.
You forgot the one part. The part when the Visigoths come in and chop everybody's heads off.
Well, we'll see.
Okay.
We'll see. For more on this topic, not just left or right, not just leftism or conservatism on campus, but the fraud in academia. We're pleased to be joined by former Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. He is the president-elect of the Young America's Foundation. If you don't know Young America's Foundation, you should. I remember first familiarizing myself with Young America's Foundation when I was an undergrad at Northwestern because they helped me and the conservative group I was head of bring conservative speakers to college campuses, getting honorariums lowered and that sort of thing. And that's just some of the work Young America's Foundation does. And Governor Walker has written a column about bringing conservatism back to colleges. Governor Walker, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, good morning. Good to be with you guys.
So,
Happy early Thanksgiving.
yeah, happy Thanksgiving to you and your family as well. So, what was the decision to in your post political life? Why Young America's Foundation?
Well, when Ron Robinson, the current president, came to me with the idea, I hadn't even thought of it. Obviously, like you, I'd been exposed to YAF, which people want to learn more about it. It's yaf.org, yaf.org. But it's one of those where I've been there as a young person. My kids have done it. One went to the University of Wisconsin, one went to Marquette. Both of my sons are graduates. They were helped by being exposed to conservative thoughts and ideas and speakers. My wife and I had both been at the Reagan Ranch, but most importantly was these two statistics. Nearly 60% of young people, young adults, I should say, those voters under the age of 30, think socialism is somehow acceptable. And the same group, under 30, less than 25% are exceptionally proud to be Americans. And that, to me, just suggests that we got a long ways to go to deal with media, social media, K through 12 education, college professors like you just talked about, years of hearing from Barack Obama and now people like AOC. The good news is, I guess, as stacked as the deck is against those of us right of center, I'm surprised that it's not bigger than 58%. But we got our work cut out for us, and that's what we're doing at YAF.
With respect to the infrastructure, though, that they've built, going back to what Bogosian was saying about these academic departments that are dubious, but also another point that he and others have made, there's something like 232 bias response teams on college campuses around the country, and these bias response teams are sort of an Orwellian description of speech minders and thought crime minders. I mean, that's a lot of infrastructure that Young America's Foundation and conservatives generally are up against.
Well, that's right, and it's why we've got to. YAF alone's not going to be able to do it. It's going to be a combination of others out there, but we got to wake up. Bill Bennett, years ago when he was working in the Reagan administration, started to warn about this. He said, if we concede academic thought and entertainment to the left, this is what they're going to use to forge lasting majorities out there, and they're well on their way, particularly amongst millennials. But we can counter that. As I go to college campuses in particular, what I found, the optimist in me has found, is that young people are more libertarian, I think, than they are just liberal. Even with all this infrastructure, what they want more than anything is just to be left alone, a chance to go out on their own. There's some good intentions. A lot of young people want to do more than just make money. They want to make a difference. They want to have an impact in the world. We've got to show them that freedom, fighting for freedom and free enterprise and free speech, is a lot more free than free college tuition or free health care or any of the other socialism ideas that haven't worked in places like Venezuela and others around the world. But it's exposing that, and it's the other part that I think the column you read really speaks to is the fact that it's not just this infrastructure and this shaming. There's this incredible intimidation factor out there, not only with college professors, but even with many of their colleagues, that if those who have any sort of moderate to conservative ideas speak up, that somehow they're going to be attacked. And we see that in poll after poll we've done with students, and we've got to push back on that. Colleges should be the place where free speech is celebrated, not the place where it's most under siege.
But doesn't it, thank you again, Governor Walker, this is John Cass of the Tribune. Thanks for basically providing a lot of refugee status for Illinois taxpayers.
Yeah,
so
right.
My taxes go up. Thanks a lot, man. But in the meantime,
120,000 Illinoisans have moved to the Badger State in the last decade.
A lot of bratwurst
right.
there, baby. Yeah. I hate.
Since I was governor, taxes went down $13.1 billion.
We've chosen a different
path.
path.
Much alone this year in Illinois, right?
Yeah, right, exactly.
The question I wanted to ask you, Governor, there's a lot of focus on the college campus, but what about K through 12? As a father of two recent, college students, I have to tell you that what I've found is that from K through 12 is when it starts. When the left starts getting kids to bend the knee, and that.
Oh, and it's everywhere. It's like it's like putting your finger, in the water coming through the wall. The bottom line is, you're exactly right. I saw it with my son. I've got two kids who are both college graduates, but years ago, one of them came back from an AP government class in high school, and had an assignment. The teacher was relatively objective, but the assignment was in a textbook that talked about the deficits being created by Ronald Reagan's tax cuts. Of course, the tax cuts didn't create the deficits. The spending that Congress did on top of that were the ultimate reason for the deficits coming out of the 80s. But that's where not only is there a bias in many of the teachers who are biased towards whatever their teachers union says to be for or against, but on top of that, even those that want to be objective, oftentimes the textbooks have a definite liberal slant. And so our focus with the F for sure is in college campuses. It's bringing great speakers like Ben Shapiro in and many others out there, but also going into high school and even starting pre-teens, where we in the future we want to start getting messages to pre-teens digitally and otherwise, start working with schools in middle and high school, giving them a chance to have more objective textbooks and some alternative thoughts out there. And just making the case, if we taught everyone objective American history, world history, economics, and financial history, the world would be a whole lot more conservative if people just knew the facts.
The other thing, though, too, is we've got to do some better marketing, right? I mean, the Boghossian column speaks to how they come up with a catchphrase or a particular one or two sentence line of argumentation, and then it's just rinse and repeat, and it becomes the mantra to organize around. And I mean, as somebody who's been in the persuasion space as a politician, you know, you understand that marketing is important. And I'm just thinking about that Harvard-Yale game. And the kids that interrupted, the kids that were there at the 50-yard line interrupting the game, they're seeking status. They want to be applauded just as they're applauding themselves. And are we thinking as conservatives about how to make conservatism attractive, being a conservative and embracing things like respect for the First Amendment, that as conferring status on these young people?
Well, without a doubt. For years, those of us on the right think and talk with our head. Those on the left think and talk with their heart. We shouldn't concede the logic of our head, but we've got to find more and better ways to articulate that from the heart. And I think that's true of any age, but I think it's particularly true with Americans under the age of 30, that there's, like you say, a real emotional appeal. And some people dismiss that. I actually think it's great that young people want to make a difference, that they want to change the world, that they want to, have people feel better. What we need to do is combine that desire, that which I think is a good thing in its essence, but give people the logic to explain that just feeling good isn't enough, that we actually have to do things that make a difference. And I think that's really powerful. We also have to talk differently. I mean, in the world of Twitter, even though most Americans, I think it's only 22% of all American adults are on Twitter, increasing numbers are at the younger ages. So we've got to not only be on Twitter, we've got to communicate in the ways that are shorter, more succinct, and that's where the left has kind of had, cornered the market on talking points and bumper stickers. We shouldn't reduce everything to that. But I always tell people the difference between socialism when I'm on campus and freedom is the difference between a taxi and Uber. Taxis are highly regulated, highly restricted, big tax or fee, box other people from getting into the industry. That's what socialism is like. Freedom is like Uber. As long as you safely get from one point to another, that's all they care about. Those of us who are conservative at the core, as long as you don't hurt the health and safety of your neighbor, go out and do your own thing. Pursue your own dream, live your own life, do what you want to do. We believe in the individual. They believe in the government.
Before we let you go, Handicap Wisconsin in 2020 for us, some encouraging polling coming out of the state last week with respect to impeachment, particularly among independents. But do you feel like the president is in a pretty decent position to pick up that key state next year?
I do. It's going to be incredibly difficult, though, so we always appreciate help from our neighbors to the south, going door to door and things like that. But the impeachment hearings are a lot like what happened to me with the protests and the recall years ago, where not only did it energize our base, it really kind of hacked off a lot of independent, moderate voters who felt like the left had really overstepped their bounds. And I think that's what's happening with impeachment. The more the president can make the case to swing voters that he's actually getting things done that matter for people's life, the economy is better, wages are up, families are doing better, the country's doing better, the more he can make that case and say, and look at these nuts, these do-nothing Democrats, all they care about is trying to impeach I think that'll backfire as it did in Wisconsin.
He is Scott Walker, former governor of Wisconsin, who we wished had invaded Illinois and taken it over during his time there. And now he is the president-elect of Young America's Foundation, bringing conservatism to college campuses. Governor Walker, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Happy